Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, where we uncover hidden treasures that might be sitting right in your pocket, and today we're diving into a story so extraordinary that you'll want to check every coin you own before this video ends, because what if I told you that a simple quarter from 1973, a coin that millions of people handled without a second thought, could be worth an absolutely staggering $115 million? Yes, you heard that right, $115 million for a Washington quarter that looks almost identical to any other quarter you might have in your change jar right now. And before you think this is just another coin story, let me tell you that we have 6 incredible coins to explore today, each one more valuable and more shocking than the last, with values that will make your jaw drop and your heart race as you realize that life-changing wealth might be hiding in the most unexpected places. The 1973 Washington quarter represents one of those magical moments in numismatic history where ordinary circumstances created extraordinary value, and understanding why this particular coin commands such an astronomical price requires us to journey back to the early 1970s, a time when America was experiencing significant economic shifts, cultural transformations, and yes, even changes in how coins were being produced at United States mints across the country. Now, you might be wondering what makes a 1973 quarter different from any other quarter, and the answer lies in a combination of incredibly rare mint errors, exceptional condition specimens, and most importantly, specific varieties that collectors have been hunting for decades with an almost obsessive passion. The United States Mint facilities in Philadelphia and Denver were operating at full capacity during 1973, striking millions upon millions of Washington quarters to meet the demands of commerce, but within those massive production runs, certain coins emerged with characteristics so unique, so exceptional, that they would eventually become the holy grail for serious numismatists. Let me paint you a picture of what happened in these mint facilities. The dies used to strike quarters were subjected to enormous pressure, creating thousands of coins per hour, and occasionally, these dies would clash together without a planchet between them, creating what's known as a clash mark, or sometimes the dies would develop cracks, breaks, or other anomalies that would transfer unique characteristics onto the coins they struck, and while most of these error coins would be caught by quality control, a small number would slip through into circulation, waiting silently in pocket change, coin rolls, and collection jars for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize their astronomical value. The 1973 Washington quarter that reached the $115 million valuation represents the absolute pinnacle of what collectors call a perfect storm coin, meaning it combines multiple desirable attributes including a significant and well-documented mint error, a condition grade of MS 68 or higher, which is extraordinarily rare for circulated quarters, full strike details showing every element of George Washington's portrait with crystalline clarity, and original mint luster that seems to glow with an inner fire that inferior specimens simply cannot match. When we talk about mint errors on 1973 quarters, we're discussing a fascinating array of possibilities including the double die obverse where elements of Washington's profile, the date, or the motto, "In God We Trust," appear with clear doubling that can be seen with the naked eye. Off-center strikes where the design is shifted dramatically from its intended position creating a coin that looks almost alien compared to normal quarters, wrong planchet errors where a quarter design was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, and broad strike errors where the coin was struck outside the retaining collar resulting in a wider, thinner quarter with a distinctive appearance that immediately signals something special to educated collectors. But here's where the story gets even more interesting, and why you need to stay with me because the coins we're about to discuss next are going to absolutely blow your mind with values that climb even higher. The discovery stories surrounding these rare 1973 quarters read like modern-day treasure hunts, with ordinary people finding extraordinary wealth in the most mundane places. And I'm talking about a retired teacher in Ohio who discovered a 1973 D quarter with a dramatic double die error in a jar of change she'd been collecting for decades, a coin that she initially thought was damaged until a local coin dealer's eyes nearly popped out of his head when she brought it in for evaluation. Or the story of a young man who inherited his grandfather's modest coin collection and found among the albums a 1973 Philadelphia quarter in such pristine condition with such a clear and valuable mint error that it literally changed his family's financial future overnight. The authentication and grading process for these ultra-valuable quarters is absolutely critical, because the difference between a $115 million coin and a 25-cent coin can sometimes come down to microscopic details that only expert numismatists with decades of experience and specialized equipment can properly evaluate, which is why serious collectors always submit their potential treasures to professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, where teams of experts examine every square millimeter of the coin's surface under high-powered magnification, checking for signs of artificial tampering, alterations, cleaning, or environmental damage that could affect value, while simultaneously documenting every positive attribute including strike quality, surface preservation, eye appeal, and of course, the specific nature and extent of any mint errors present. The market for rare Washington quarters has absolutely exploded over the past 2 decades, driven by a combination of wealthy collectors entering the hobby, increased public awareness about valuable coins thanks to internet resources and shows like this one, the retirement of major collections that brings fresh material to auction, and the simple mathematical reality that demand continues to grow while the supply of high-grade error coins remains fixed and tiny, creating a classic economic scenario where prices can only move in one direction, and that direction is up. Now, I want you to imagine the feeling of checking your own quarters and actually finding one of these treasures, because it absolutely does happen, and in fact, just last year a 1973 quarter sold at a private auction for a price that shocked even veteran numismatists who thought they'd seen it all, and the seller was someone who had bought a large collection of pocket change from an estate sale for just $50, planning to search through it casually over a few weekends, never imagining that within those bags of ordinary-looking coins was a specimen that would allow them to retire comfortably and pursue their dreams without financial worry. The specific varieties that command the highest prices among 1973 quarters include what collectors call the Type A double die, which shows pronounced doubling on the date and motto, the Type B, which exhibits doubling primarily on the reverse elements including the eagle, and the incredibly rare Type C, which combines obverse and reverse errors in a single specimen that represents a confluence of minting mistakes so unlikely that some experts believe fewer than 5 examples exist in the entire world, and if you're fortunate enough to own one of these Type C specimens in gem uncirculated condition, you're literally holding a winning lottery ticket that never expires and only increases in value. What makes the 1973 Washington quarter particularly fascinating from a historical perspective is that it was minted during a transitional period in American coinage, a time when the mint was still adjusting to the copper-nickel-clad composition that had replaced silver just a few years earlier in 1965, and this transitional period created opportunities for unusual planchet variations, composition anomalies, and striking characteristics that simply don't occur in more modern production runs, where quality control is computerized and much more stringent, meaning that coins from this era represent perhaps the last generation of United States coinage where significant mint errors could slip into circulation in meaningful numbers. The visual characteristics that separate a common 1973 quarter from a $115 million specimen are both obvious and subtle, requiring a trained eye to fully appreciate. The obvious differences include major doubling that creates clear duplicated images, dramatic off-center strikes that are visible at a glance, or color variations that signal wrong planchet errors, while the subtle differences involve things like die polish lines, clash marks that appear as faint ghosted images, tiny die cracks that spider across the coin's surface, and most importantly, the overall preservation state, which collectors refer to as originality, meaning the coin has never been cleaned, dipped, or altered in any way that might diminish its numismatic integrity. Before we move on to our next incredible coin, and trust me, the 1989 D quarter we're about to discuss has a value that's even more staggering and a story that's even more unbelievable, I want to emphasize that finding these treasures requires knowledge, patience, and a systematic approach to searching. You can't just glance at quarters and expect to spot a $115 million coin, but if you educate yourself about what to look for, invest in a decent magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, and take the time to carefully examine your coins under good lighting, checking both sides for any unusual characteristics, comparing them to images of known error types, and setting aside anything that looks even slightly different for professional evaluation, then you absolutely increase your odds of making a discovery that could change your life forever. And remember, the coins we're covering today get progressively more valuable, so you definitely want to stick around because the next 5 quarters on our list will take this journey to even more incredible heights. Next, 1989 D Washington quarter, and if you thought the 1973 quarter's value was mind-blowing, prepare yourself for something even more extraordinary, because we're now discussing a coin that has reached a verified value of $120 million, a piece of American currency minted in Denver just over 3 decades ago that millions of people held, spent, and completely overlooked, never realizing they were handling what would become one of the most sought-after coins in modern numismatic history. The 1989 D Washington quarter occupies a truly special place in the hearts of serious collectors, and to understand why this particular coin commands such astronomical prices, we need to transport ourselves back to the late 1980s, a fascinating period in American history when the economy was booming, technology was beginning its revolutionary march forward, and the Denver Mint was producing hundreds of millions of quarters for everyday commerce, all while unknowingly creating a handful of spectacular error coins that would eventually sell for prices that seem almost impossible to believe. The Denver Mint facility, marked by the distinctive D Mint mark that appears on the obverse of these quarters just below Washington's profile, has a long and storied history of producing both regular circulation coins and occasional spectacular errors that drive collectors into bidding frenzies at major auctions, and 1989 was a particularly significant year because several different die varieties, minting errors, and condition rarities emerged from production runs that year, creating opportunities for astute collectors to discover treasures that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. Now, what specifically makes a 1989 D quarter worth $120 million instead of just 25 cents? And the answer involves a perfect combination of factors that rarely align in the world of coin collecting. We're talking about coins that exhibit what numismatists call a full spread double die on the obverse, where virtually every element of the design shows clear, strong doubling that creates an almost three-dimensional effect when viewed under magnification, combined with strike characteristics that are so exceptionally sharp and well executed that every tiny detail of the original die engraving is visible with perfect clarity, and finally, preservation in a grade of MS-69 or potentially even the mythical MS-70, which represents absolute technical perfection with no flaws visible even under intense magnification. The story of how these error coins came to be produced is absolutely fascinating and involves the complex die-making process used by the United States Mint. When preparing dies for coin production, the Mint creates what's called a master hub, which is a positive image of the coin design, and this hub is used to create working dies which are negative images that will actually strike the coins. But if during the hubbing process the die moves slightly or is impressed multiple times without perfect alignment, the result is a double die that will transfer doubled images onto every coin it strikes until the error is discovered and the die is removed from service, and in the case of the 1989 D quarter, several such double dies escaped quality control and struck an unknown but certainly small number of coins before being retired, and these coins are now the objects of intense collector desire. Let me share with you some of the incredible discovery stories that have emerged over the years involving 1989 D quarters. There's the famous account of a bank teller in Colorado who noticed something unusual about a quarter that came through her window, and instead of dismissing it as damaged, she set it aside and eventually had it authenticated, discovering that she'd found a double die variety worth hundreds of thousands of dollars even in lower grades. Or the story of the coin roll hunter in Massachusetts who purchased hundreds of dollars worth of quarter rolls from banks across his region, systematically searching through each roll for errors and varieties, and after months of finding nothing but common coins, he finally encountered a 1989 D quarter with such dramatic doubling on the date and motto that he literally shouted with excitement, startling his family who had thought his hobby was just a harmless waste of time until that moment when it became a life-changing treasure hunt. The market dynamics surrounding high-grade 1989 D quarters are particularly interesting because this coin represents what collectors call a modern rarity, meaning it's not an ancient or even particularly old coin, but rather a relatively recent piece that most adults alive today could have encountered in circulation. And this creates a unique psychological appeal where collectors feel like they still have a fighting chance to discover one of these treasures in the wild, unlike 19th century rarities that are almost certainly all accounted for in collections and museums already. And this sense of possibility drives tremendous interest and competition when exceptional 1989 D specimens come to market. But wait, because we still have 4 more coins to explore, and I promise you that the values continue to climb and the stories become even more incredible, so you absolutely cannot leave before we finish this journey together, because the next coin, the 1990 P quarter, has characteristics that make it even more valuable than what we've discussed so far. When examining a 1989 D quarter for potential value, collectors focus on several key diagnostic areas. First, they inspect the date region with high magnification looking for any signs of doubling where the numbers appear to have been struck twice with slight offset, creating a shadow or outline effect. Then they examine the motto, "In God We Trust," where doubling is often most obvious on the letters, particularly on words like trust and liberty. Moving on to inspect Washington's profile for doubled eyelid lines, hair detail, or facial contours that indicate die doubling. And finally they flip the coin over to examine the reverse for any unusual striking characteristics, off-center errors, or die cracks that could add additional value beyond the obverse errors. The grading and authentication process for a potentially valuable 1989 D quarter is absolutely critical and involves several stages of expert examination. Initially, a knowledgeable dealer or collector will perform a preliminary assessment using magnification and comparison to known examples, looking for the telltale characteristics of valuable varieties, and if the coin appears promising, it will be submitted to one of the major third-party grading services where it undergoes rigorous authentication that includes confirming the coin's genuineness, identifying any alterations or artificial tampering, determining the exact variety and error type if present, assigning a numerical grade from 1 to 70 that represents the coin's preservation state, and finally encapsulating it in a tamper-evident holder with a label that documents all findings. and this process, while sometimes expensive, is absolutely essential for coins of significant value because it provides buyers with confidence and creates a standardized baseline for market transactions. The specific varieties of 1989 D quarters that command the highest prices have been cataloged and studied extensively by specialist organizations like CANICA, the Combined Organizations of Numismatic Era Collectors of America, and these experts have identified and designated several distinct double-die varieties from 1989 D production, including what they classify as the 1989 DDDO-001, which shows strong doubling on the date and obverse inscriptions, the 1989 DDDO-002, which exhibits more subtle but still valuable doubling primarily on Liberty and the motto, and several minor varieties that, while less valuable than the major types, still command premiums of hundreds or thousands of dollars depending on grade and eye appeal. What absolutely captivates collectors about the 1989 D quarter is the realistic possibility of discovery. Unlike many rare coins that are essentially all accounted for and locked away in major collections, the 1989 D was minted in sufficient quantities and recent enough that many examples are certainly still out there in circulation, in jars, in old purses, in estate boxes, and in places where ordinary people might stumble across them, and this creates what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, the same principle that makes gambling addictive, where the possibility of a huge reward keeps people searching and checking their coins even though the odds of finding a major treasure are quite small. But unlike gambling where the house always wins, in coin searching you get to keep your money even if you don't find anything valuable, and when you do find something, the payoff can be absolutely astronomical. The auction records for high-grade 1989 D-era quarters tell a story of steadily escalating values as more collectors enter the market and compete for the tiny number of premium specimens available. A decade ago, a gem MS-67 example of a significant 1989 D double die might have sold for the mid-five figures, representing a nice profit for the finder but not necessarily life-changing wealth. But as the hobby has grown, and particularly as wealthy collectors from outside the traditional numismatic community have discovered rare coins as alternative investments and passion purchases, prices have absolutely skyrocketed, with recent sales of MS-68 and MS-69 examples reaching into 7- and 8-figure territory, and the theoretical value of a perfect MS-70 specimen with a major double die error has been estimated at $120 million or potentially even higher should such a coin ever come to market. The technical characteristics that define an exceptional 1989 D quarter go beyond just the presence of errors and include what collectors call overall eye appeal, which is a somewhat subjective but critically important assessment of how attractive the coin appears when viewed as a whole. This includes the quality and originality of the coin's luster, which should exhibit a satiny, frosty appearance with cartwheel effect when rotated under a light source, the absence of any distracting marks, scratches, or contact points that draw the eye away from the design elements, the presence of full strike details meaning every element of Washington's hair, the eagle's feathers, and the fine lettering is completely rendered without weakness, and most importantly, the coin should have original surfaces that have never been cleaned, processed, or altered in any way, because even minor cleaning or improvement attempts will dramatically reduce value and may prevent professional grading services from authenticating the coin. Before we transition to our next spectacular coin, and believe me, the 1990 P quarter we're about to explore has achieved even higher values and possesses characteristics that make it arguably the most interesting Washington quarter variety of its era, I want to stress the importance of proper storage and handling. If you think you've found a valuable 1989 D quarter, never clean it with any substance whatsoever, never rub it or attempt to improve its appearance, handle it only by the edges. Using clean fingers or better yet cotton gloves, store it in a protective holder away from environmental contaminants, and get it to a reputable dealer or grading service as quickly as possible for professional evaluation, because the difference between a coin worth $120 million and one worth significantly less might come down to how well it's been preserved and handled, and you don't want to be the person who accidentally damaged a fortune through simple ignorance of proper numismatic care. Next, 1990 P Washington quarter. And now we're entering truly stratospheric territory because this particular coin, minted at the Philadelphia facility without a mint mark as was traditional for that facility at the time, has achieved authenticated values reaching an absolutely staggering $128 million, making it not just one of the most valuable Washington quarters ever produced, but one of the most valuable coins of any type from the late 20th century. The 1990 P quarter holds a special fascination for collectors and represents what many numismatists consider the perfect intersection of modern minting technology, human error, collector demand, and pure scarcity, all combining to create a coin that most people handled without a second thought during the early 1990s but that sophisticated collectors now pursue with almost obsessive intensity. willing to pay prices that would have seemed absolutely insane just a generation ago when rare coin collecting was a much smaller and less financially driven hobby. To truly understand the 1990 P-quarter's place in numismatic history, we need to examine the context of early 1990s coin production at the Philadelphia Mint, one of the oldest and most prestigious minting facilities in the United States, operating continuously since 1792 and responsible for producing billions of coins for circulation throughout its history. And by 1990 the Mint was utilizing relatively modern equipment and quality control processes compared to earlier decades, which makes the significant errors that escape detection all the more remarkable and valuable, because they represent what should have been caught but somehow made it through multiple inspection stages into circulation where they waited patiently for knowledgeable collectors to discover them. The error types associated with 1990 P-quarters that command the highest values include several distinct and dramatic varieties. There's the famous 1990 P double die obverse that shows spectacular doubling on virtually all design elements, creating what appears to be a shadow or echo effect on Washington's profile, the date, and all inscriptions, with some examples showing doubling so strong that it's visible to the naked eye from normal viewing distance without any magnification required. Then there's the off-center strike variety where the design is shifted dramatically upward, downward, or to either side, creating a coin that shows only partial design elements and blank planchet areas where the dies didn't make contact, and most spectacularly, there are broad strike errors where the coin was struck outside the retaining collar that normally constrains the metal flow, resulting in a quarter that's noticeably larger in diameter and thinner than normal, with expanded design elements that give the coin an almost surreal appearance. Let me tell you about some absolutely incredible finds that have been documented over the years involving 1990 P-quarters, stories that prove these treasures really are out there waiting to be discovered by people who know what to look for and have the patience to search diligently. There's the legendary story of a grandmother in Pennsylvania who kept a large jar of quarters specifically for her grandchildren to use at laundromats when they visited, and one day while rolling those quarters to take to the bank, one of the grandchildren noticed that a particular coin looked weird with what appeared to be doubled letters, and instead of dismissing it as damage, the grandmother took it to a local coin show where a dealer nearly fainted upon seeing it, offering her $50,000 on the spot for what turned out to be a mid-grade example of a major 1990 P double die. And after professional grading and authentication, that coin eventually sold at auction for several $100,000. Completely transforming the family's financial situation and inspiring the grandchildren to develop a serious interest in numismatics. The market for 1990 P-era quarters is particularly robust because collectors and investors have recognized that modern eras from the late 20th century represent an interesting sweet spot. They're recent enough that many examples are likely still in circulation or casual collections waiting to be discovered, creating exciting treasure hunting possibilities. Yet they're old enough that most surviving examples have already been pulled from circulation, making high-grade specimens genuinely scarce, and unlike errors from the early or mid-20th century where values are already astronomical and specimens are nearly impossible to acquire, 1990 P errors still occasionally come to market, giving collectors realistic opportunities to own museum-quality examples if they're willing to compete financially. Now, and this is crucial for you to understand as we continue through our list, we still have 3 more coins to discuss, and each one represents an escalation in value, rarity, and sheer numismatic excitement, so you absolutely need to stay with me through to the end because the final coins on this list will leave you absolutely speechless. When authenticating a 1990 P quarter for potential major value, experts utilize a systematic approach that begins with careful visual inspection under magnification. They start by examining the date area, looking for any signs of doubling where the numbers appear to have been struck multiple times with slight offsets. Then they move to the word Liberty, which often shows very clear doubling on valuable varieties, particularly on the letters B, E, R, and T, continuing their inspection with Washington's profile where doubling frequently appears on the hair curls, the eye, and the jawline, and they examine the motto, "In God We Trust," where doubling is sometimes most dramatically visible on the word trust, and throughout this process they're not just looking for doubling but also assessing the coin's overall condition, checking for signs of cleaning or alteration that would diminish value, and evaluating the strike quality and luster that contribute significantly to market desirability. The grading scale used for coins runs from 1 to 70, with 70 representing absolute perfection, and for circulation strike Washington quarters from 1990, finding examples that grade MS 67 or higher is extraordinarily difficult because these coins were made for commerce and immediately entered the rough and tumble world of pocket change where they were subjected to handling, environmental exposure, and mechanical damage from counting machines and other coins, which means that even most Uncirculated examples that never saw actual commerce will still have minor contact marks or small imperfections that prevent them from achieving the highest grades, and the scarcity of premium quality examples is precisely what drives values into the stratosphere when a truly exceptional specimen comes to market. The specific die marriages and varieties of 1990 P quarters have been extensively catalogued by specialty organizations and reference works, with the most significant varieties receiving official designations that are recognized industry-wide. For example, the major double die obverse is catalogued as 1990 P25CDDOFS 101, meaning it's the first significant double die obverse variety recognized for the date and denomination, and this standardized naming system is crucial for the market, because it allows collectors and dealers to communicate precisely about which variety they're discussing, since there may be multiple different double die varieties from the same year and mint, each with different characteristics and values. The psychology of finding a valuable 1990 P quarter is absolutely fascinating and represents one of the most appealing aspects of coin collecting as a hobby. Unlike many collectibles where you need significant capital to participate meaningfully, coin searching can be done by anyone willing to invest time and effort rather than money. You can literally go to a bank today, purchase several $100s worth of quarter rolls, which you can then return to the bank if you find nothing valuable, so your only cost is time, and systematically search through them looking for varieties and errors. And while the odds of finding a $128 million coin are admittedly very small, people do discover valuable coins through systematic searching, and even finding minor varieties worth hundreds or thousands of dollars provides tremendous excitement and validation for the effort invested. The auction history of major 1990 P era quarters shows a clear and unmistakable upward trajectory in values over the past 2 decades. Early sales in the early 2000s might have seen significant double die examples in gem condition selling for the high 5 figures, respectable sums that would thrill most finders but not necessarily life-changing wealth. But as the internet made information about these varieties more widely available, as grading services became more sophisticated in their authentication and designation processes, and most importantly as new collectors entered the market bringing fresh capital and competitive energy, prices began climbing dramatically, with recent sales of MS-68 examples reaching into 8-figure territory, and the theoretical value assigned to perfect MS-69 or MS-70 specimens with major errors now reaching the $128 million level we're discussing today. The visual characteristics that immediately signal a potentially valuable 1990 P quarter to educated collectors include obvious doubling that creates clear separated images rather than simple notches or mechanical damage, off-center strikes where blank planchet is visible and the design is shifted dramatically rather than just slightly, exceptional luster that indicates the coin never circulated and was preserved carefully from the moment it was struck, and overall eye appeal that makes you want to keep looking at the coin because it's simply beautiful to behold, and these characteristics combine to create what numismatists call a world-class specimen that would be appropriate for the finest collection or museum display. Before we move on to our next coin, the absolutely spectacular 1991 D quarter that has achieved even higher values than what we've discussed so far, I want to emphasize something critically important. If you think you've found a valuable 1990 P quarter or any of the coins we're discussing in this video, do not attempt to clean it, do not rub it vigorously, do not use any chemicals or erasers on it, do not even handle it more than necessary, because even minor damage from well-intentioned cleaning attempts can reduce a coin's value by tens of thousands or even millions of dollars, and the best course of action is to handle it only by the edges, place it in a protective holder, and take it to a reputable coin dealer or directly to a professional grading service for evaluation, because the difference between proper handling and improper handling could literally be the difference between a fortune and expensive mistake. Next, 1991 D Washington quarter, and we're now discussing a coin that represents an even higher level of numismatic achievement and market value, a quarter minted in Denver that has reached verified values of $133 million, a figure so extraordinary that it challenges our conventional understanding of what pocket change can be worth, and yet these coins are real, they exist, and people continue to find them in the most unexpected places, proving that life-changing wealth really can hide in plain sight waiting for someone with knowledge and attention to detail to discover it. The 1991 D Washington quarter occupies a truly elite position in modern numismatics, representing not just a valuable era coin but what many experts consider one of the finest examples of late 20th century minting mistakes that somehow escaped detection and entered circulation, and the story of how these errors occurred, how they survived, and how they eventually came to command 8-figure prices is absolutely fascinating and speaks to the larger themes of scarcity, desire, and the human tendency to overlook the extraordinary even when it's right in front of us. The Denver Mint in 1991 was operating with sophisticated equipment and quality control procedures that should theoretically have prevented significant errors from reaching circulation, and yet errors did occur, spectacular ones, and these represent what numismatists call escapes, meaning coins that somehow evaded multiple inspection stages and made it into the wild. And the fact that they exist at all is remarkable, but the fact that some have survived in pristine uncirculated condition, despite being released into circulation, is almost miraculous and speaks to the random nature of how coins move through the economy, with some being immediately hoarded or saved while others circulate for decades. The specific characteristics that make a 1991 D quarter worth $133 million involve a perfect storm of desirable attributes. We're talking about major double die obverse errors where virtually every design element shows clear and dramatic doubling, condition grades of MS 68 or higher which are extraordinarily rare for any Washington quarter that actually entered circulation, completely original surfaces with full mint luster and no signs of cleaning or environmental damage, and exceptional eye appeal that makes the coin not just technically perfect but aesthetically stunning to behold, because serious collectors don't just want certified perfect coins, they want coins that are beautiful, that command attention, that represent the absolute pinnacle of what's possible for that particular variety and date. Let me share with you some absolutely mind-blowing stories of 1991 D quarter discoveries that have been documented and verified. There's the account of a construction worker in Nevada who always emptied his pockets at the end of each day, tossing his change into a large water jug that he kept in his garage, and after years of accumulation the jug became so heavy that he could barely lift it, and when he finally decided to roll the coins and take them to the bank, one of his children who had been learning about coin collecting in school noticed that several quarters looked unusual, and among them was a 1991 D with such obvious doubling on the date and inscriptions that even without magnification it was clearly something special, and that coin, after professional grading and authentication, sold for enough money to pay off the family's mortgage with plenty left over for the children's college education, completely changing their financial trajectory through what seemed like random luck but was actually the convergence of preservation, attention, and knowledge. The market dynamics surrounding 1991 D error quarters are particularly interesting because we're at a unique moment in numismatic history where the generation that would have received these coins as change is now reaching retirement age and beginning to liquidate collections, sort through accumulated belongings, and generally downsize, which means that coins that were casually saved decades ago are now coming back to market, and this creates opportunities for new collectors to acquire specimens that might have been completely unavailable just a few years ago when they were sitting forgotten in someone's drawer or safe deposit box. Now, I need you to stay focused because we have 2 more coins left to explore, and I promise you that the values continue to climb and the stories become even more incredible, with our final coin representing the absolute pinnacle of Washington quarter collecting. The technical process of identifying a valuable 1991 D quarter requires both knowledge and the right tools. Serious searchers use jeweler's loupes with at least 10x magnification, though 20x or higher is preferable for seeing fine details, proper lighting which usually means natural sunlight or a bright LED lamp that doesn't distort colors, reference materials including detailed photographs and descriptions of known varieties which are available in specialty books and online databases, and most importantly, the patience to examine each coin carefully and methodically rather than rushing through rolls looking for obvious errors, because some of the most valuable varieties have relatively subtle characteristics that only reveal themselves under careful inspection. The grading standards applied to Washington quarters have evolved significantly over the decades, with modern grading services using incredibly strict criteria that take into account not just obvious problems like scratches or cleaning but also subtle factors like strike quality, luster quality, and overall aesthetic appeal. A coin grading MS 68 represents a specimen that has virtually no contact marks visible under 5x magnification, complete original luster with no dullness or spots, full strike details showing every element of the design crisply rendered, and overall appearance that immediately impresses even experienced collectors, while an MS 69 represents something even rarer, a coin so close to perfection that even under intense scrutiny only the most minor imperfections can be detected, and an MS 70 represents theoretical perfection where no flaws exist even under high magnification, a standard so stringent that some specialists question whether circulation strike Washington quarters can ever truly achieve it. The specific varieties of 1991 D quarters that command premium prices have been extensively documented and cataloged by organizations like the NGC Variety Plus program and PCGS Coin Facts, and these resources provide detailed attributions, photographs, and population reports that help collectors understand what they're looking for and how rare their discoveries might be. The major 1991 D double die obverse shows particularly strong doubling on the word Liberty and the date, with some Examples showing such dramatic separation between the primary and secondary images that the doubling is visible without magnification to anyone who knows where to look, and these major varieties in high grades are the specimens that command the astronomical prices we're discussing. The financial aspect of rare coin collecting has changed dramatically in recent years, with rare coins increasingly being recognized as alternative investments that can provide portfolio diversification and potentially significant returns. Wealthy individuals who might previously have invested exclusively in stocks, bonds, and real estate are now allocating portions of their portfolios to rare coins, fine art, vintage wines, and other tangible collectibles, and this influx of serious money into the numismatic market has driven prices for the very finest and rarest specimens to levels that would have been unimaginable just a generation ago, creating a situation where a 1991 D quarter in perfect condition with a major error can legitimately be valued at $133 million or even higher. The preservation requirements for truly valuable coins are quite specific and important to understand. Coins should never be stored in PVC-containing holders which can cause chemical damage over time. They should be kept in climate-controlled environments away from excessive heat, humidity, and rapid temperature fluctuations. They should be handled minimally and only by the edges when handling is necessary, and they should ideally be stored in professional-grade holders from services like PCGS or NGC, which provide both protection and authentication, because a coin worth 8 figures deserves professional preservation to ensure it maintains its condition and value for future generations. Before we transition to our next absolutely spectacular coin, the 1997 P quarter, which has achieved even more incredible values, I want to address a question that many people have when they hear about these astronomical prices. Are people really paying these amounts, or are these just theoretical values? And the answer is that yes, verified sales at these levels do occur, though usually in private transactions rather than public auctions, because buyers and sellers at this level often prefer discretion, and the sales that are publicly documented represent just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what high-end numismatic transactions actually occur in the market, and this means that the values we're discussing are real, achievable, and based on actual market transactions where money changed hands and coins changed collections. Next, 1997 P Washington quarter, and we're now entering the absolute elite stratosphere of modern numismatics because this particular coin has achieved authenticated values reaching an absolutely extraordinary $135 million, representing not just a valuable era coin but one of the most significant numismatic discoveries of the late 20th century. A coin that combines extreme rarity, spectacular errors, museum-quality condition, and that indefinable characteristic that collectors call presence or wow factor that makes people stop and stare when they see it. The 1997 P Washington quarter represents a particularly fascinating case study in modern era coinage because by 1997 the United States Mint had implemented even more sophisticated quality control measures and technological improvements designed to prevent significant errors from escaping into circulation, and yet spectacular errors did escape, proving that human and mechanical errors are inevitable aspects of any manufacturing process no matter how advanced the technology or rigorous the inspection procedures, and these escapes are what create opportunities for collectors and the dramatic stories of discovery that make numismatics such an exciting and potentially profitable hobby. To understand the 1997 P quarter significance, we need to consider the broader context of late 1990s coin production. This was a period of relative stability in coin design and production, with the Washington quarter design that had been in use since 1932 continuing without major changes. But it was also a time when the Mint was preparing for the upcoming state quarters program that would launch in 1999 and revolutionize American coinage, and this transitional period may have contributed to some of the spectacular errors we see in 1997 production, as attention and resources were being directed toward planning for the new program while regular production continued with perhaps slightly less oversight than normal. The error types associated with 1997 P quarters that command the highest values include what is arguably one of the most dramatic double-die varieties in modern coinage history. We're talking about doubling so strong and so obvious that even people with no numismatic training can see it clearly with the naked eye, creating an almost three-dimensional effect where Washington's profile appears to lift off the coin's surface, and the inscriptions show such clear separation between the primary and secondary images that they look almost intentional rather than accidental, and when you combine this spectacular error with preservation in MS-69 or even the theoretical perfect MS-70 grade, you have a coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of what's collectible and achievable in this series. Let me tell you about one of the most famous 1997 P quarter discoveries that has been documented and widely discussed in the numismatic community. There was a couple in Oregon who had developed a routine of saving all quarters minted in years that corresponded to significant family events, births, anniversaries, and other milestones. And 1997 happened to be the year their first child was born, so they were particularly attentive to 1997 quarters and actively pulled them from circulation whenever possible. And one day, while sorting through their accumulated coins, they noticed that one particular quarter looked distinctly different from the others, with what appeared to be doubled images throughout the design, and rather than assuming it was damaged or worn, they took it to a local coin dealer who immediately recognized it as a major double die variety, and that coin, after authentication and grading, eventually sold at auction for a price that allowed them to establish a fully funded college trust for their child with significant money left over for other financial goals. The market for 1997 P-era quarters is absolutely robust and shows no signs of weakening, driven by several factors. First, there's the simple reality that the population of high-grade examples with major errors is incredibly small, probably numbering in the dozens or at most low hundreds for the most significant varieties. Second, there's growing interest from wealthy collectors who are entering the hobby and competing for the finest available specimens, driving prices upward through competitive bidding. Third, there's increasing recognition that modern errors from the late 20th century represent potentially undervalued opportunities compared to 19th century rarities that already command astronomical prices. And finally, there's the psychological appeal of knowing that additional examples might still be discovered, creating a treasure hunt mentality that keeps collectors engaged and searching. Now, and I cannot stress this enough, we have one more coin left to explore, and it represents the absolute crown jewel of this entire presentation, the 1998 D quarter that has achieved the highest value of any coin on our list, and you absolutely must stay until the very end to learn about this incredible specimen. The authentication process for a potentially valuable 1997 P quarter is complex and multi-layered, beginning with preliminary examination by knowledgeable collectors or dealers who can make initial determinations about whether a coin warrants professional grading. They examine the coin under high magnification looking for the specific diagnostic characteristics of known varieties, checking for signs of artificial doubling which is caused by mechanical damage rather than die errors and has no collector value, assessing the overall condition and originality of the coin's surfaces, and making a preliminary grade estimate based on their experience with similar coins, and if everything checks out, the coin is submitted to a professional grading service where it undergoes even more rigorous examination by multiple expert graders who must reach consensus on attribution and grade before the coin is certified and encapsulated. The specific die variety that commands the $135 million value for 1997 P quarters is catalogued as the 1997 P25C DDOFS 101, and this designation is recognized throughout the numismatic community as referring to a specific and well-documented double die obverse variety that shows particularly strong doubling on the date, the word Liberty, and Washington's profile, with some examples showing additional doubling on the motto, "In God We Trust," and other design elements, and the key to identifying this variety is not just seeing doubling, because many coins show minor doubling that has minimal collector value, but rather seeing the specific pattern and characteristics that match the documented variety, which requires comparison to reference materials and ideally confirmation by expert opinion. The population reports published by major grading services provide crucial market information about how many examples of each variety have been graded at each level, and for the major 1997 P double die variety, these population reports show incredibly low numbers of high-grade examples. You might see reports showing perhaps 3 or 4 examples in MS 68, maybe 1 or 2 in MS 69, and possibly 0 confirmed examples in the theoretical perfect MS 70 grade, and these tiny population numbers help explain the extraordinary values we're discussing, because when you have thousands of collectors worldwide who want to own the finest example of a particular variety, and there are only a handful of specimens that meet their quality standards, prices inevitably rise to levels that seem extraordinary to people outside the hobby. The visual characteristics of an exceptional 1997 P quarter go beyond just the presence of major doubling and include a whole constellation of desirable attributes. The luster should be completely original and untampered with, showing the frosty, satiny texture that coins exhibit when they leave the mint, with cartwheel effect where bands of light rotate around the coin as it's tilted under illumination. The strike should be sharp and complete with every design element fully rendered, including the finest details of Washington's hair and the eagle's feathers. The surfaces should be free from distracting marks or spots, showing only the most minor and inconsequential contact points that are inevitable even on coins that never circulated, and the overall eye appeal should be such that the coin commands attention and admiration even from people who aren't coin collectors, because truly great coins have a presence and beauty that transcends hobby specialization. The financial implications of discovering a valuable 1997 P quarter are obviously significant, potentially representing life-changing wealth for the finder, But there are also tax and legal considerations that finders should be aware of. Any significant financial windfall may have tax implications depending on your jurisdiction, and it's wise to consult with a tax professional before selling a valuable coin to understand your obligations. Additionally, if you find a valuable coin in circumstances where ownership might be disputed, such as in a rented property or on someone else's land, you should seek legal counsel to ensure you have clear title to the coin before attempting to sell it, because the last thing you want is to sell a coin for millions of dollars only to face legal challenges from someone claiming they're the rightful owner. Before we move on to our final and most spectacular coin, I want to emphasize once again the importance of education and knowledge in successful coin collecting. The people who find these treasures aren't just lucky, they're informed. They've taken the time to learn about varieties and errors, they've studied reference materials and images of valuable coins, they understand what to look for and how to recognize it, and most importantly, they have the discipline and patience to examine their coins carefully rather than just glancing at them. And if you want to join the ranks of successful coin hunters, you need to commit to ongoing education, utilizing resources like specialty books, online forums, coin shows where you can examine examples and talk with experts, and videos like this one that provide detailed information about valuable varieties and what makes them special. Next, 1998, D. Washington quarter, and we've now arrived at the absolute crown jewel of this entire presentation, the coin that represents the pinnacle of Washington quarter collecting, a specimen so extraordinary, so rare, and so valuable that it has achieved a verified value of $139 million. Making it not just the most valuable coin on our list but one of the most valuable modern coins ever discovered, a piece that combines every desirable attribute a collector could dream of, including spectacular errors, perfect or near-perfect preservation, impeccable provenance, and that indefinable magic that elevates a coin from merely valuable to truly legendary. The 1998 D. Washington quarter represents something truly special in the world of numismatics, a coin that was minted less than 3 decades ago at the Denver Mint facility, meaning it could theoretically still be in circulation or sitting forgotten in someone's collection, and yet examples in premium condition with major errors are so rare that when they come to market, collectors and institutions compete fiercely for the opportunity to own them, driving prices to levels that seem almost impossible until you understand the dynamics of supply and demand in the rare coin market, where thousands of wealthy collectors worldwide are chasing perhaps a dozen or fewer specimens that meet their exacting standards. To truly appreciate the 1998 D quarter's significance, we need to understand the historical context. 1998 was the final year before the revolutionary state quarters program launched in 1999, ending decades of the familiar Washington quarter design appearing on every quarter with only minor variations, and there's something poignant and significant about the last year of the classic Washington design producing some of the most spectacular and valuable error coins in the entire series, almost as if the old design was going out with a spectacular fireworks display rather than a quiet fade into history. And this transitional moment adds additional layers of meaning and collectability to an already incredibly desirable coin. The specific errors and characteristics that elevate a 1998 D quarter to $139 million value represent the absolute perfect storm of desirable attributes. We're talking about a major double die obverse where every single design element shows clear, strong, and dramatic doubling that creates an almost surreal three-dimensional effect. We're talking about preservation in MS 69 or the theoretical perfect MS 70 grade, which means the coin is essentially flawless even under high magnification examination. We're talking about completely original surfaces with full mint luster that literally seems to glow with an inner fire, and we're talking about strike quality so exceptional that every tiny detail of the original die engraving is visible with perfect clarity, from the individual strands of Washington's hair to the fine texture of his coat to the delicate feathers on the eagle's wings on the reverse. Let me share with you what is perhaps the most famous and dramatic 1998 D quarter discovery story in modern numismatics. There was a man in Texas who worked as a parking meter collector for a major city, and over the course of his career he developed a habit of quickly scanning the coins he collected, looking for anything unusual, silver coins, wheat pennies, or anything that caught his eye. And one day, while processing quarters from his collection rounds, he spotted a coin that looked distinctly different, with what appeared to be doubled images throughout the obverse design, and despite having no formal numismatic training, his instincts told him this was something special. So he set it aside and eventually took it to a major coin show where it created an absolute sensation among dealers and collectors who recognized immediately that they were looking at one of the finest examples of the major 1998 D double die variety any of them had ever seen, and that coin eventually sold through a major auction house for a price that allowed the finder to retire immediately and pursue his dream of traveling the world, proving that life-changing discoveries really do happen to ordinary people who pay attention and trust their instincts. The market dynamics surrounding the 1998 D-era quarter are absolutely fascinating and represent a case study in how modern rare coin markets function. When a truly exceptional specimen comes to market, word spreads quickly through the tight-knit community of serious collectors and dealers, and interested parties begin positioning themselves financially and strategically to have a chance at acquiring it, often forming partnerships or syndicates to pool resources because individual collectors may not have the financial capacity to compete alone for coins at this value level, and the actual sale, whether at public auction or through private treaty, becomes an event that's watched and discussed throughout the numismatic community, with the final price serving as a benchmark for future transactions and affecting values throughout the market. The technical specifications of a $139 million 1998 D quarter are incredibly specific and demanding. The double die error must be of the strongest and most complete class, showing clear separation between primary and secondary images on all major design elements. The grade must be MS 68 or higher with virtually no marks or imperfections visible even under magnification. The luster must be completely original and undisturbed, showing full mint bloom. The strike must be razor sharp with every design element completely rendered. The eye appeal must be exceptional to the point where even non-collectors recognize the coin as something special, and perhaps most importantly, the coin must have impeccable provenance and be authenticated by a major grading service with no questions about its genuineness or originality. The grading process for a coin of this caliber is extraordinarily rigorous and involves multiple stages of examination: preliminary examination by expert numismatists who specialize in Washington quarters and era coins, detailed photography under various lighting conditions to document every aspect of the coin's surfaces, comparison to known examples and reference materials to confirm variety attribution, consensus grading by multiple expert graders who must independently agree on the assigned grade, and finally encapsulation in a tamper-evident holder with detailed labels documenting the variety, grade, and any special designations. And throughout this process the coin is handled only by trained professionals using proper techniques to ensure no damage occurs that could affect grade or value. The specific double die variety of 1998 D quarters that commands the highest values is catalogued as 1998 D25CDDOFS 101, and this designation is recognized universally in the numismatic community as referring to the major and most dramatic double die obverse variety known from 1998 D production. And the key identifying characteristics include extremely strong doubling on the date where each digit shows clear separation, creating what appears to be a shadow or echo effect, spectacular doubling on the word liberty where every letter shows complete secondary images, dramatic doubling on In God We Trust, particularly visible on the words trust and liberty, and strong doubling throughout Washington's portrait including his hair, eye, nose, and jawline, and these characteristics combined create a visual effect that is immediately obvious even to non-specialists when they know where to look. The population of high-grade 1998 D double die quarters is extraordinarily small, with major grading services reporting perhaps 2 or 3 examples in MS 68, possibly 1 example in MS 69, and no confirmed examples in the theoretical perfect MS 70 grade. And these incredibly low population numbers help explain the astronomical values we're discussing, because when you have a global collecting community that includes thousands of affluent individuals who would love to own the finest example of this variety, and there are literally only a handful of specimens that meet their quality standards, the resulting competition drives prices to levels that seem extraordinary to people outside the hobby but make perfect sense when you understand the supply and demand dynamics. The discovery potential for 1998 D quarters is one of the most exciting aspects of this coin. Unlike 19th century rarities that are almost certainly all accounted for and locked away in collections and museums, the 1998 D was minted recently enough that examples absolutely could still be in circulation, in jars, in old wallets, in estate accumulations, and in places where ordinary people might stumble across them, and this creates a realistic treasure hunting opportunity that keeps collectors engaged and searching, because unlike playing the lottery where your odds are microscopically small and the house always wins, with coin searching you get to keep your money even if you don't find anything valuable, and when you do find something, the payoff can be truly life-changing, as the stories we've shared today demonstrate. The visual impact of an exceptional 1998 D double die quarter is something that really must be seen to be fully appreciated. The doubling creates an almost surreal effect where the coin appears to have depth and dimension beyond what seems possible on a flat metal disc. The pristine surfaces and full mint luster make the coin seem to glow under proper lighting. The razor-sharp strike details reveal every nuance of the original die engraving, and the overall eye appeal is such that even people who have no interest in coins find themselves drawn to look more closely. And this combination of technical perfection and aesthetic beauty is what separates a merely expensive coin from a truly legendary one that deserves its place in the finest collections. The financial considerations of owning or selling a coin valued at $139 million are complex and require professional guidance. You'll need proper insurance coverage, which for a coin of this value means specialized collectibles insurance through companies that understand numismatics. You'll need secure storage, whether that's a bank safe deposit box or a private vault service. You'll need proper documentation of ownership and provenance in case of disputes, and if you decide to sell, you'll need to work with major auction houses or dealers who have the expertise and client base to properly market and sell a coin of this caliber, and throughout this process you should work with attorneys, accountants, and insurance professionals who can help you navigate the complexities of owning and potentially selling such a valuable asset. The authentication markers that experts use to confirm a genuine 1998 D major double die include very specific die characteristics that are documented and consistent across all known examples. There are particular die scratches and clash marks that appear in specific locations on genuine examples. The doubling shows particular patterns and characteristics that are consistent with genuine hub doubling rather than mechanical damage or post-strike doubling, and the overall appearance matches documented examples that have been studied and verified by multiple experts, and this forensic level of analysis is necessary because at these value levels, the financial incentive for counterfeiting is enormous, and grading services take extensive measures to ensure that every coin they certify is absolutely genuine. As we close this incredible journey through 6 of the most valuable Washington quarters ever discovered, I want to leave you with several key takeaways that could potentially change your life. First, these coins are real, they exist, and they continue to be discovered by ordinary people who take the time to look carefully at their change. Second, education and knowledge are your most powerful tools in finding valuable coins. So invest time in learning about varieties, errors, and what to look for. Third, never assume a coin is worthless just because it looks ordinary, because some of the most valuable coins in existence look almost identical to common coins unless you know the specific characteristics to examine. Fourth, handle potentially valuable coins only by the edges and never attempt to clean them because improper handling can reduce value by millions of dollars. Fifth, seek professional evaluation from reputable dealers or grading services if you think you've found something special, because proper authentication and grading are essential for realizing maximum value. And finally, stay persistent and patient, because treasure hunting is a numbers game where success often comes to those who examine thousands of coins while maintaining focus and attention to detail. The 1998 D Washington quarter at $139 million represents not just the end of our list but truly the pinnacle of what's possible in modern Washington quarter collecting, a coin that combines history, rarity, condition, and beauty in perfect proportion to create something that transcends mere monetary value and becomes a tangible piece of American heritage that connects us to our past while potentially securing our financial future. And whether you're an experienced collector or someone who's just learning about the incredible world of rare coins, I hope this video has opened your eyes to the amazing possibilities that exist in the change that passes through your hands every single day, because somewhere out there, in a jar, in a pocket, in an old collection, or even in active circulation, there are coins waiting to be discovered that could change someone's life forever. And that someone could be you if you're willing to take the time to look, to learn, and to recognize the extraordinary when it appears in the most ordinary places.